I just want to give you one more thought experiment, okay? Now, this is going to take a lot of imagination, but, you know, I'm sure we'll do it. I want you to imagine that you're fed up with teaching, and you've got yourself a job as a builder, right? And you're working for Bill, as it happens. You've decided that, you know, you want to do building, and you've never done much building before in your life before. And Bill has asked you to lay some drains, say, for a new house that he's building. And he's trained you up about how to lay drains, and he's shown you how to do it, given you a handout, you know, given you a bit of a demo and so on, and left you to do some drain laying. And he's just coming around the corner now to give you some feedback. And I want to know what should be in that feedback that Bill gives to you as a trainee. What information, what content, what do you want to see in that feedback, please? Okay. May I pick your brains again and see what your views are on this thought experiment too. And I'll write up the ideas on the board here. Obviously, there's quite a bit you might want in that feedback. But would somebody just like to give us one thing you'd like to see in that feedback? That as a sort of a learner who's lacks confidence and skill and so on, you know, what would be most helpful in terms of improving your performance and learning? There's one over one. Yes.
Whether or not the drain meets the minimum standard of drains.
Right. So where are we? Sorry about that. Just wait. There we are. Standards met. Presumably, does that stand? Oh, I think you're just about to see that. It says standards met. That's good enough, I think. There we are. As good as I can do. The standards are met. The actual drain does what a drain should do. When you flush the loo, the stuff goes away. Yeah. So anything else you'd like to see in the feedback? So information about whether the standards have been met or not. Yes, thank you.
To get them to self-assess it themselves.
Right, thank you. Where would you put that? At the end? Middle?
I would actually start off and ask them, how do you think you've done?
You'd start off with that. Okay, thank you. I'll just put it at the top here then. So we've got self. Why would you want to start off with that? Would you mind telling us what your reasoning is for starting off with that self-assessment?
Well, it wasn't mine, actually. It was Julie's.
All right.
But I think it's kind of based on the other thing. If they've done something that you might not quite kind of see it the same way, they could explain why they've done it in the way they've done it.
Right.
And it's actually how they've applied their learning to that particular task.
Yeah. So you're getting into, going back to that diagram that we showed earlier, we're trying to sort of decode this sort of personal construction which the students have made for how to lay drains and find out what's in their head, as it were, aren't we? So self-assessment's a great way of finding that. If they've done a crap job and they say they've done a brilliant one, we're worried. If they've done a crap job and they say, I've done a crap job and these are the things that are wrong with it and this is what I do next time, and that assessment is pretty good, actually, in terms of how they do it, then we're obviously much less worried. But we're not going to get that information if we go in and assess straight away. So we've got self-assessment, standards met. Anything else we'd like to see? Thank you.
Point out the positives.
The positives, okay, thank you very much. So what's right with it? That would be very helpful, wouldn't it? Obviously, we'd certainly want that encouragement. Who'd like to give us another thing we'd like to see?
It's mirrored with a self-assessment. What about targets for development? What do you think you didn't do
Thank you.
quite right? And what do you need to do in order to rectify that?
Targets for development, what wasn't done well, either process or product, you know, either in the way it was done or the outcome. You know, we want to know what's not right, what to do as in order to improve. Anything else you'd like to see in the yeah? Okay, so an opportunity to ask questions, perhaps related to these targets for development. Perhaps, how am I going to do that? If you say, you know, it needs to be backfilled more carefully. I mean, you know, what exactly does that mean? Another one? An action plan, thank you very much. Targets for development, I'll put that there. Okay, well, you've done very well, I think. Remember, I'll give you 2 thought experiments to try and find out what Black and William found. I'd just like to sort of summarize what you've said here about the feedback here. Have the standards been met? And there seems to be a requirement that there are standards implied there. And these, we might call these goals. The student needs to know what is a good piece of work. What am I aiming for? Yeah? The other thing you've asked for is positives. I'm going to call that a medal. We need a medal for what we've done well. And the other thing you've asked for is a target for development. I'm going to call that a mission for how to do a better job next time and to get closer, perhaps, to the goals. And that's the finding of Black and Williams' research. And those two, you know, cover about 90% of what these 2 professors toiled for 4 years in order to find. So you've done very well. Well done, Wales. Sorted it all out in 20 minutes. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. That's not what we do. Yeah? More likely, the student's feedback is merit. 7 out of 10, 45%. Yeah? You didn't ask for a grade. You didn't ask for a percentage. And you're right to, because the most important information you require as a learner is how to do a better job next time, what have I got right, and so on. And so one way of characterizing this is that learning is a bit like rolling a rock up a slope. You've got a copy of this in your pack if you turn over a notch or 2. And so students need their medals for what they've done well. I've rolled my rock this far. Well done. And it doesn't matter how far that rock is up the slope. If a student has done if a student is a very poor student, as we would be if we were learning under build to build, it doesn't matter. We still need to know what we got right. Yeah? Well done, you built the trench going downhill. That's exactly what we needed. Yeah? Here are the other things you need to get right, or whatever. We need to know what we've done right, even if we're a very weak student. And we also need to know how to get better. Yeah? And in fact, even if we're an absolutely brilliant student, we need to know how to get better. It's not helpful for a brilliant student to be told, that is an outstanding piece of work, fantastic. It leaves them without the mission. How do I get better? Where am I moving now? Am I just to coast here? You know, that's not real learning, is it? If we're saying, job done, all over, all finished, you stay in bed. You know, I mean, that's not, we should be challenging and pushing always. So this is called, you know, student-centered feedback, or sometimes the technical term for it is ipsatic, but I wouldn't bother with that. The important point is we take the student's position as a reference, and we say, I don't care where you are on this slope. It's not relevant, really, for this learning process now. Wherever you are, though, you've achieved something, and this is what you've achieved, and you need to achieve more, and this is what you need to do to get better still. Yeah? And by the way, this is the way that's up. The goals, the standards. That's, you know, these are the assessment criteria or whatever for a brilliant piece of work. And everybody needs, even if, you know, here we've got a student who's rolled their rock a hell of a long way. Here we've got a student who's having a struggle at the bottom of the slope. They both need a medal and a mission. The research shows that very often the student who hasn't rolled their rock very far gets a hell of a lot of missions and not so many medals. Our natural inclination when we see a weak piece of work is to scribble over it all the mistakes that person has made. Not very encouraging for the learner if that's their experience all the time. If somebody repeatedly says, crap piece of work, crap piece of work, crap piece of work, after about 7 or 8 goes, you begin to think, hey, I'm no good at this. And you might begin to withdraw your effort. Similarly with a student who's just rolled their rock along a very long way, if you keep saying fantastic piece of work, fantastic piece of work, fantastic piece of work, they begin to think, am I working too hard here? You know, because actually, you know, I've got discos to go to, you know, my mum's a bit ill, you know, I could probably do a bit, you know, next time, if I get a distinction for that that assignment, maybe next time I'll spend less time on the next assignment and get merit. It's good enough for me. That's not a very helpful approach from the learning point of view either, of course. So we want our medals and our missions and our goals. One last thing about the feedback. The research shows that 3 characteristics are very helpful. One is that it should be forward-looking and positive. Yeah? If a student does a piece of work and there's spelling mistakes all over it, it's better to say, next time, use a spell check, or next time, use a dictionary, than it is to say, it's less helpful to say, there are a lot of spelling mistakes in this piece of work. When you say there's lots of spelling mistakes in this piece of work, that's backward-looking, because the work was already being completed and they can't be fixed, really, or not easily fixed. It's backward-looking, and it's negative. It's saying what's wrong with it. If it's forward-looking and positive, you're saying, next time, forward-looking, positive, check the spelling. Not next time, make sure there are not so many bloody awful spelling mistakes, because that's forward-looking and negative. Forward-looking and positive. Next time, use a dictionary. Next time, use a spell check. Next time, check your spelling. So that sounds like advice rather than criticism, and people take it better. That's the only reason. Task-centered, not ego-centered. Don't go saying, you're brilliant at this. It's not helpful, because of a number of reasons which Professor Carol Dweck in the States has discovered. The best form of feedback that you can give, rather than saying ego-centered feedback, you're really clever, is to say, let's look at this trend, shall we? It's straight, it's going in the right direction, that's great. Now let's look at this trench again. Next time, we want to make sure there's not so much of a wiggle in it or whatever was wrong with it. How are you going to sort that out? Okay, so next time, use the line more carefully, use the string more carefully, make sure it's taut, and then your trench will be shorter. So we want medal and mission type feedback. One last thing. I've talked about constructivism already, but I just want to stress that when learners learn, they form their own meanings. Sadly, they do not remember what we say. They make it up. Yeah? And that's official. Everybody who studies the brain or the mind, philosophers, psychologists, neurophysiologists, brain surgeons, you name it, everybody agrees that what happens when people learn is that they make a new set of constructs, so it's called a construct. They link brain cells, and that encodes the meaning in some magical way we don't really understand. But they link brain cells together, and in order for it to make sense, it has to be linked to what they already know. Yeah? It's no good just recalling a phrase that the teacher's told you. You've got to know what it means. What do we mean by a meaning? Well, we look up meanings in dictionaries, and it tells us what a word means in terms of other words that we know. And in the same way, a meaning in learning is something where we've got an expression or something which is in terms of what we already know. So that has to be linked to what we already know. There has to be a link between the new learning and the old learning. And this brings us back to our cycle, and this is why these certain teaching methods that have been trialed hundreds, thousands of times with control groups and experimental groups to discover which teaching methods have the biggest impact. We discover many of the teaching methods that do exceptionally well do that, because the student is getting their, they're making their constructs inaccurately. And formative assessment is that process of providing feedback to the learner. You've got this bit right, but that bit needs working on. Yeah? Change of constructs. We are rewiring their brain, almost, getting them to rewire their own brain by giving them the information about what they've got and what they haven't got. They're not remembering what you say, they're making it up. They're making up their own version of what you teach them.